There we go. We're connected. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Sib. Sorry, I wasn't on yesterday. As sometimes happens, the guest had a scheduling malfunction and wasn't able to make it. So we've had a longer weekend, and the sun's out. It's been a good few days my side. So I hope you're all well. And we're going to be going off on all sorts of great directions today. Lots to cover. So I'll welcome my guests first of all. Thank you, Neil and Antonio, for joining me today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yes, great to be here. I'm happy to join.
So you're so in sync already. You didn't talk over each other. You knew how that was going to play out. I love it. And of course, I've been fortunate and humble enough to be invited on your Access Chat interview and the community you've got on Twitter, which we'll talk a bit more. So it was lovely that I could share what I've been up to. But I think it's really nice to be able to share both of your sort of career and stories and what you're working on at the moment for my audience and my community. So we got Gavin's already. OMG, what awesome guests. So we're off to a flyer here. Thanks, Gavin. Good to see you watching. So I mean, I guess we'll do the usual, get you both just to give a bit of a sort of bio summary about your background, and then we'll go from there. Anyone want to go first? Shall I choose someone?
Go on. So I'll start. So
Great.
I've been working in the field of assistive tech for about 20 years. Started working for a Cambridge-based company called Insist, which we've been discussing offline, as you know them too. So their focus was around assistive tech and dyslexia. I am myself dyslexic and ADHD, so I've got skin in the game, as it were, in that respect. So that affects the way that I use technology and the way that I do my work. It also is a fuel for the passion that I put into my work. And the last 10 years, I've been working for Siemens and then ATOS, which in the sort of enterprise IT space, and I'm globally responsible for accessibility for ATOS now, both internally for our own people and our product sets, but also for our clients. And then outside of work, co-founded Access Chat with Antonio and Deborah Rue, and also on the board of a couple of other disability-focused organizations. So Genius Within, focusing on neurodiversity, World Institute of Disability, which is a more generalist organization based out of California.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. Is that Antonio?
Well, I work directly with Neil, but I started my career a few years ago. And I started with pirate radios. That's my taste for media, and that's how I started. And then when things when the radio waves became more commercial, then I left. And in the 90s, the Portuguese military service was basically mandatory, so I had to go into service. I was expecting to be there for a year, but I ended up staying 7. So while there, I studied sociology, half of the time, and then I was working as a military recruiter, and I've worked in the media archives of the army for some time. And then when my time ended, I ended up working in Expo 98 in Lisbon. It was and then that's probably one of the first times where I touched with accessibility, because we had responsibility for taking care of all access of the expo and making sure that the visitor had a good experience. So the expo was in a very flat area, and all the pavilions had directives in order to be accessible and friendly. And I remember at the time that the pavilion of Japan did exceptionally well on that matter, and being one of the most interesting pavilions on that aspect. No, after that, I work in telcos for quite some time, and in 2006 I moved to Ireland to work for Siemens IT Solutions, and at the time Siemens was in the mobile phone business, so I was working on that support of service, and then I ended up moving to ATOS in 2011, working on several digital transformation projects, and then I later met Neil, and then we work together in several projects. We co-founded Access Chat, and more recently, within the University of Cork, I joined a group of academics and other people from the industry, and we created a digital transformation lab within the university space, where we try to advocate for digital transformation in Ireland.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And just to clarify one thing, Antonio, I've put that you both work at ATOS. Do you actually work for ATOS, or is it you work with Neil on other projects?
No, I work. Yeah, I work for ATOS,
Yeah.
and we yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And you mentioned when Siemens were in the mobile phone sort of world. So what I would update for those that don't know, what would you say Siemens have done in more recent years, if it's not mobile phones?
Well, they are working on the Expo 2020.
Okay.
That will delay for 2021, and if you are curious, I think it will be interesting to look at some of the aspects that they're doing in terms of accessibility within the Expo. Mm-hmm. I think it will be very interesting, and I know that Be My Eyes will be one of the partners of Expo 2020. So there's some interesting collaboration there in order to improve the visitor experience, especially the way how people see the pavilions.
But what they're responsible for in general is they touch all sorts of areas of people's lives. You know, they're making trains, power stations, mobility solutions. A lot of the sort of underlying industrial technologies are run by Siemens. So they're a huge organization with like lots of different industries, as well as tech, power generation, you know, offshore wind, all this kind of stuff. So they're just not in your face every day. They're not like a big sort of well-known sort of California tech company, but they're embedded in our daily lives. And a bit like ATOS too, we are not an organization that is sort of flashing across your TV screen every 5 minutes. We're not a Twitter or a Facebook, but we're, you know, in the background delivering stuff that is part of the sort of infrastructure and fabric of people's daily lives. So I think a lot of the stuff that we've done recently is enabling people to work from home during the COVID-19 crisis. You know, spending a lot of time, you know, enabling, you know, video conferencing and remote working and all this kind of stuff. So stuff that we were discussing just before we came on air, you know, all of that is, you know, key to everybody's productivity now. But it's been something that we've all been doing for years. Everyone's just catching up with the disabled community now.
Yeah.
And to your point, Neil, we collaborate a lot with Siemens in terms of workplace. We develop a lot of workplace solutions for them, and they recently announced that they are going to make remote work official across the world. So every employee within Siemens, independent from geography, are going to be able to work, you know, at least 3 days from home on a regular basis. It's going to be part of the norm. So basically, everyone is entitled to that when that is possible, because we know that not every job function allows you to work from home.
Sure.
If you are in a factory, but they are making that mandatory. And I think this could be it's a very interesting way and a very interesting directive, because I think there is a potential of making workplaces more inclusive when you are able to open the workplace to remote work opportunities.
Cool. Yeah, Neil, you sort of read my mind. I was going to say a bit more what ATOS does, and that was great, that explanation, that it sort of is within infrastructure and a sort of DNA of other businesses, as sounds like similar to what Siemens have been doing, who you both would, or not, but basically
we both work for. So how would I describe us? I mean, we do everything from helping the European Space Agency land space probes on comets, to the IT for the Olympic and Paralympics, to building quantum learning machines, to the more mundane stuff like enabling circuit and teams and remote working. So as with all of these large tech systems integrators, we do a multifaceted approach to technology, and I'm quite privileged, and I think Antonio is too, that we get to see across what our organization does, because quite often people sit in their own little bit and don't really get to understand the totality of it. We have this this part of our business called our scientific community, and then we have an expert community, which Antonio and I are both part of, where all of the different bits of the organization get together to share knowledge, and that's, I think, a fairly precious thing, because then you get to understand, oh, hey, we're enabling research over here, we're delivering supercomputing to predict weather for the the European Union over there, or as I said, the space agency, or doing stuff with the Paralympics and the Olympics. So it's there is a lot that's going on, and sometimes it's difficult to keep up with everything that is going on.
Sounds a lot. Maybe it's great to hear some of those examples for people to just get that understanding almost of the output or the outcome of some of the work you do. What struck me as interesting there is that when we talk about disabled people as a community, or we talk about accessibility and inclusion, maybe in a kind of a business function or department, it sounds like a very specific thing. But obviously, when you get, as we've been into it ourselves now for a long while, I mean, disabled people is a very disparate group of people with different conditions and different needs, but also from the business function of accessibility and inclusion, it's not like one thing. It actually needs to be across the business and across the products and services. So how that must have been quite a challenge to educate businesses on it should be in everything you do, not as a separate siloed thing that you do.
I like to say that somehow in a funny way. Internally, we are like accessibility spammers. So we go across the different sides of the organization, and we try to make ourselves known within our organization for people to know that what they can do on accessibility. So we have a team, and what I try to do is to show our colleagues that we have a team on accessibility, and that they can count with us on projects, because as we know, we are a large organization. Not everyone knows everyone, so it's particularly important that we are particularly proactive, go inside our different communities and say, we are here in case you need our help.
And sometimes we go outside to go in. So part of the reason that we ended up on Twitter and starting Access Chat was we wanted to connect with people, and sometimes it's actually quicker to do that from the outside using external tools. So we acknowledge that actually accessibility is always a work in progress.
Yeah.
So the complexity and the enormity of trying to get everything to work with everything else, and at the same time work in the different configurations to meet the different needs, is definitely a challenge, and one that we're continually striving to meet. I think that every organization will tell you that it's not possible to always meet those expectations or those needs. And it's best to be honest about that. At the same time, there are things that we've definitely improved in our time. So the awareness is clearly one, raising it up the corporate agenda, getting in place policies, and starting to structure what it is to have a career. So one of the things that we've done, which I'm particularly proud of, is the apprenticeship scheme that we've run. 40% of all of the UK accessibility team are former apprentices.
Wow.
And we've been trailblazing the creation of an accessibility apprenticeship standard with the Institute for Apprentices. So that will become a recognized qualification that will be subsidized by grant funding. So organizations that don't know how to do accessibility but want to engage have a path to get someone on board and trained and everything else up to a high standard, so that we can start doing this systematically across industry and not in, as you say, the little silos.
Yeah, sounds good. Can you just tell us a bit more about Access Chat? I mean, I and probably a fair few watching have been, engaged with it and know it, but for anyone that doesn't, it'd be nice to share a bit more what it is. But yeah, and then you touched a bit on why you did it in terms of making new connections and building community. But yeah, it'd be cool just to expand a little bit more on that.
Okay, you go, Antonio.
Well, I've been doing Twitter chats for some time. I started with Megan Biro at something called T-Chat, that then developed with Work Trends, where we're having discussions over talent management, best practices about future of work, and this is something that goes back to 2008, 2009. And then when I met Neil, we were looking at ways of engaging. How can we start having online conversations? We were doing some kind of active research to see who was having online conversations on this topic, and then we found Deborah. I was not aware of Deborah. I didn't know anything about Deborah, so I found Deborah and came, oh, Neil, there's someone here trying to have a conversation about accessibility, but she might need help to structure the conversation. And then Neil told me, oh, I know Deborah. Okay, good. And then we started the conversation with Deborah. And I think one of the key things of Access Chat is we found that it's particularly important to talk about accessibility with people that don't know what accessibility is and don't often talk about accessibility. We know, Martin, you know perfectly, you probably had attended a good number of conferences about disability, accessibility, where you know everyone. Everybody knows you, and it's a comfortable space. We wanted to talk about accessibility in other spaces where often nobody talks about accessibility. Technology events. We wanted to bring people to our conversation where we could question them about accessibility. We have different leaders from companies that went to Access Chat knowing nothing about accessibility, but were willing to have that conversation. And I think that fits in one of the purposes of Access Chat, is basically taking the conversation of accessibility out of the regular, usual suspects and take it out to other people who are basically curious or want to know more.
Go on, Neil.
So just building upon that, I think that the desire on our part was also to remove some of the anxiety on the part of organizations from talking about accessibility and disability issues, because big companies can feel very nervous about coming and talking about disability, often because we all get things wrong from time to time. But when they do go wrong, and they go wrong in public, it can be really bad. And so organizations are nervous about that. And so what we wanted to do was create a platform where it was a safe space for them to come and have a conversation about inclusion and about how we can work together, so that we could really grow that community amongst people that aren't necessarily specialists. Because I think Antonio probably took it a bit too far by saying they know nothing, because they're engaged in the topic, right? They're not your web accessibility auditor, or they're not specialists, but they are doing stuff in the space. And we wanted to embrace that desire on the part of these organizations and these individuals to do something good and inclusive, and to highlight that and bring people together and make connections. And as a result of the chats over the years, a number of businesses have started, a number of initiatives have gone on. The chats have been included in teaching materials in various universities. So we're learning all the time. Plus, it's a learning opportunity for myself, because actually, apart from the formalized learning and the technical learning, the only way we're going to learn about accessibility is through talking to people.
Yeah.
and through having those conversations with the community. So those were a number of drivers, and we've been going 5.5 years. I never expected it to last that long. We've done it every week. We've had 4 weeks off in 5.5 years.
Wow.
And we just keep rolling.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit of a labor of love, really.
Yeah, I know that one. Gavin has just written. Well, he wrote when we just brought him on earlier on, but he said, "Where is the boss? Where's Deborah Rue?" So obviously, I do the daily sib midday or weekday. So Deborah's probably in bed at the moment. But the idea is that I will get Deborah on for a later timed edition in the next month or two. And I have interviewed Deborah on my podcast. So anyone watching, feel free to look up Deborah Rue and hear her story in general. But yeah, of course, Deborah's worked with you both on Access Chat, right?
Yeah. And Deborah's an absolute powerhouse. And one of the good things about the fact that we have this relationship that goes beyond our organization, it's not, Access Chat is not something that belongs to our employer. It's something that we've created and we do outside, and we do it in our spare time. And that's enabled us to bring in people from the US as well. So we have conversations with people from all over the world because we've built a community. So we have active participants from North America, South America, Africa, Middle East, India. It's a bit hard. Australia, but it's a bit harder because of the time zones. But some people get up really early and participate.
It was difficult to have people from Australia because of the time zone challenge, but we're able to have them once. So it's particularly interesting for us to try to, as we know, in some countries there's an ongoing conversation on these topics. There's UK is quite strong in terms of organizations supporting. And they are quite savvy on communication, while in other countries they are a bit more shy. So for us, it's particularly important to find people across the world who are doing something interesting and then bring them to Access Chat for everyone to know.
Yeah, I remember I had Nia, who does a lot of accessible tourism in India, on the Daily Sib, and it really struck a chord because it was so interesting, that difference in the country, the politics, the economics, the cultural, people in the UK loved it for that difference, but of course it resonated with people in other countries as well. So yeah, it's definitely a great idea to make it more global. So I think we've got an understanding, obviously, both of your backgrounds, of some of the work that ATOS does. We've covered Access Chat. So I mean, really looking at where we've been this year, I mean, COVID-19, it's turned the world upside down. There's a lot of people on the Daily Sib talking about sort of silver linings, that there's been elements that have changed culture and behavior to be better around inclusion and accessibility, but others are still concerned at what the long-term effect might be. But just be great to get your views. What's it been like at ATOS and the projects you're doing because of COVID-19?
Oh goodness, so much stuff so much stuff is going on. I think that that absolutely the shift to remote working is something that we're seeing our customers grasping. We as an organization have actually been very flexible and had remote working as a sort of fairly core tenet for a long time. So actually, when COVID-19 hit and we were asked to work from home, it wasn't particularly difficult for our organization to adapt. What was more challenging was the ramping up to help our customers adapt, because they weren't necessarily in the same place that we were. So and they also work in different ways. So for example, as consumers, we've noticed which organizations have done well and which haven't. So when you ring up a call center, for example, certainly in the early days, good luck getting through to anyone on the phone. But some of the stuff that we've been doing is putting in place remote call centers and stuff like this. Now, that kind of stuff, normally you'd have people in big barns, with headsets on and sort of. But why? Why do you need to go into an industrial estate to sit at a chair in front of a computer with a headset on? You don't. So actually, what this is doing is confirming what the disability community said for a long time, is actually a lot of work can be done remotely, can be done flexibly, can be structured in a way that enables us to participate. So that's really positive. Some of the areas where we've been having to sort of adapt have also been around physical adjustments. Now, not everybody is set up to work from home. So whilst we have the infrastructure and the management culture to support people working from home, a lot of people don't have the physical space or the ergonomic setup to make that long time viable. So one of the things that I've been really pushing for is for our colleagues around the world to be making sure that they take the sort of home DSE assessments to make sure that they're not sort of balancing a laptop on one knee for days and weeks at a time, and actually thinking about investing some time into a setup, and the organization investing in their setup too. And I think that's going to continue. And actually where some of the economic data is at the moment, showing that actually the poorest people are actually the ones that are struggling the most with working from home, because they don't have the space, they don't have the equipment, and the structure of their jobs doesn't necessarily allow them to. So they're more at risk of infection, they're more at risk of financial penalties through not being able to work, and they're more at risk, if they are sort of at home able to work, of not having the space and therefore injuring themselves. So there's a lot that I think we need to be thinking about as society, as well as sort of employers and service providers, about how we might take this forward, because it's not going to go away anytime soon, despite all of the predictions that we're going to have a vaccine and be back to normal by Christmas.
Yeah, agreed. Antonio? I think you're muted, Antonio.
I think we're facing a number of challenges, and you mentioned the Zoom fatigue, and one of the things that we have been trying to do internally is to create spaces and moments where people can engage on activities that don't necessarily relate with work. Some people are doing internal competitions. They're join on a Friday and they play games. Others have coffees in the morning just to have a chat. Is like making this part of the normal work of your work routine, because you can't go to the water cooler anymore. So it's you need to find water cooler moments while working from home, and you make people okay with the fact, well, it's fine to have a water cooler moment during when I'm working from home. It's important to normalize that people don't feel, no, I need to be working 100% of the time. It's important to make those breaks, connect with colleagues, sometimes with those that you are more connected with for many different reasons, and can keep that going, saying hello, or even sometimes if a colleague is silenced for too long, just reach that colleague, say, no, how are you? No, let's have a call. Just trying to do a kind of a checkout to see if everyone is fine. I think it's particularly important for us to do that type of work, on a regular basis, trying to see, trying to discover those colleagues, because we know that everyone looks at different remote work from a different perspective. Everyone has different conditions. And it's particularly important that we care about the mental health of everyone, because people might struggle with isolation. I'm with my family. some people might be working from home alone because they live in an apartment by themselves, and they only get out for shopping, or they just order stuff online. So it's particularly important that we can be sensitive to that, and we do some work in order to check how our colleagues are. And it's important for organizations to care about that and have conversations on the topic to make sure that everyone is well.
Yeah. As always, you're both in sync, because in the end, Neil was talking of the physical risks of, RSI or bad back and all the other potential consequences of not having the right environment to work at home. And also, very much speaking, Antonio, about the mental health side, which I think, there is a pandemic, so there's obviously a general mental health, result from the fear that's been so widespread, and I think Neil did touch on it, the sort of risk of, if you go in to do the work in person, you might be more at risk of having the virus, but if you're at home, you might lose your job. And so there's so many worries and anxieties in general. But that point you made about always feeling you've got to be at the laptop and productive, for me personally, I know after a month, I really had to create those little 5 minutes to just go in the garden and not look at the screen because of that Zoom fatigue, as it's become known. Other video providers are available, but it's it's been a difficult one, I think, for a lot of people around the mental health as well. So I've got one more question I want to ask you, and then there's a question we've got from the audience, and we'll probably be drawing things to a close soon after that anyway. But for me, when you were talking about how you said you've been doing the working at home policy and the thing around that for a while at ATOS, and I know I spoke to Chris at PwC, who was saying something similar, that in that kind of consultancy world, it feels like there's things you do in-house to make the business of at ATOS better, but obviously the result of that is it benefits clients and customers. So have you got any other examples where you've innovated in-house, but it's then been very helpful for all other businesses to benefit from that innovation as well?
Well, I think generally, we're trying to employ a fairly systematic approach to accessibility, and we're trying to do that both internally and externally. So we're looking at, how we can be much more systematic in how we apply technology, and sometimes that means there is a balance to be struck between giving people what they want and what they actually need. Because they're in an enterprise, trying to make sure that stuff continues to work with all of the restrictions and complexities it's a very different kind of computing environment to your home computing environment, where you own your kit. You are essentially god of your own network. You're not when you work for a large company. The system administrator or the central IT function is effectively God, and we have to work within those kind of constraints. So a lot of what we're doing is trying to sort of bring consistency and a systematic approach to accessibility, so that we can do this in a replicable way with lots and lots of different clients. Of course, different businesses have different needs, but the approach remains the same. And so the work that we've done with ourselves and with our clients that I started out working on is something that we now bring to more and more customers.
Building knowledge and experience, right?
Yeah, and also I think our interest in the sort of social engagement model and so on is also something that is really driving innovation. So outside in, we've also been doing stuff like hackathons. So we like to engage the community, and we've been bringing in, and of course we engage in Global Accessibility Awareness Day, as you know. So we have a sort of very open approach. So we're probably some of the most open individuals within our organization, because we believe that that's how you learn. So we like to bring people in to share wherever we can, and I believe that it's a case of a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
So wherever possible, we want to collaborate, and I think that actually collaboration is one of those things that businesses are really starting to grapple with at the moment. There's been talk about collaboration tools for a long time, but actual collaboration between organizations, sharing of information, I think that the COVID crisis has actually changed some of that, because organizations and small companies and even large ones that were in competition are now finding reasons to work together on lots of topics, because actually there's mutual benefit. And I think that one of the things I would like to see long term that comes out of this is actually more work within business to mutual benefit, to benefit society. And I think one of the things I'm proud about for working for my organization is we have a raison d'etre, a sense of purpose, and we had our shareholders vote on this. So we're actually, as an organization, and some of this is driven by employees, decide what it is that the company stands for. And those are the sort of values that you start to build into what you're doing as an organization, some of which are environmental. So we're a world leader on environment in our industry. So we've just committed to be net zero by 2035, which is 15 years ahead of the targets. And what we're now looking to do is do similar stuff for inclusion. So watch this space, but I do think that there are some drivers, and that you have to bring the organization along with you on some of this stuff, and that's how we innovate and share with the business community. And I think that the things that we're doing around sort of maturity assessments and understanding how our own organization ticks helps us then go into other organizations and helps them do the same.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really fascinating. I agree with everything you said, and the point you're making about the environmental driver. And I remember reading a book called Green Marketing, and it was how the sort of environmental movement could get businesses to act, because there was a market. And obviously I even said to someone, we need to have a purple branding movement, and that was how I met Deborah, because they said, well, Deborah's written a book on it. But and so to say that inclusion and that value of the disabled consumers and disabled talent as employees is a way that's helping to drive business, to have those drivers you've just talked about, a way of really moving things through collaboration and innovation. So yeah, really amazing answer. And anything you'd like to add, Antonio?
No, we are members of Valuable 500, Caroline case, and Caroline is making a case for discussion of accessibility at the boardroom and great business case for accessibility. And I think that's a very important conversation to engage with senior leaders at board level, and basically to bring that conversation to that level of organizations. And then she's making organizations coming together to talk about accessibility. And Neil has been working a lot with the International Labour Organization, partnering and meeting people from other organizations also to have conversations on accessibility, and where companies share experiences and best practices and engage, because we need to do this together.
Yeah, agreed. And sort of similar, last question on my side was, I think we've talked about innovation and the future of inclusion and accessibility being around the sort of education, the management, leadership, the policies, and the things we've talked about in this discussion today. From I'm probably imagining some sci-fi type answers here, but like, is there anything you've seen or that you're working on that, you know, whether it's in work or in other places, that you think is going to really help push inclusion from a tech perspective?
So this is actually a fairly low tech but really important thing, and it's actually
It's
the
not
framework. No. So it's the framework which and how we think
Sure.
about inaccessibility.
Yeah.
So when we make technology or we deliver products and services, much like we do in any example, there are inputs and outputs, and some of those outputs are not accounted for. So in case of environment, that's pollution. We ought to be treating inaccessibility like pollution, and we ought to be using the same kind of framework. So because when we produce a product or a service that people can't use, the person that produces that product often isn't the one that is paying for the resolving the problem. It's either the individual. So if you can't use a product, who pays for that? It's not the software manufacturer for the most part, unless you happen to pay for a solicitor or get legal aid and take them to court. It's you, or it's the taxpayer through the government having to fund an alternative means of you doing that stuff. So that's an externality. So you take the financial concept of externalities and you start applying them, and you start looking at the things that we're doing in the environment right now. So what we're doing in terms of measuring the environment, is reporting. So the global reporting indices. So all of these have some kind of reference to disability, but what they're not doing is making any of this mandatory or giving any good KPIs. When businesses start having to report on this stuff and having concrete measures that they need to show that they're meeting, then we'll see some change.
Yeah, that was I haven't done. I did economics at uni, and you've just reminded me of that. We did a few lectures on externalities in like second year, and it was all about environment. And I'd never, until more recently, pondered it around inclusion, accessibility, or inaccessibility. But that, how would that possibly? How could that be introduced in a policy setting?
Certainly you can go on the stuff in terms of get the reporting indices to start including it and start determining metrics, but we've already got legislation coming down the line. So you've got the European Accessibility Act. Whether or not that will filter through to the UK remains to be seen, but the fact is, if Europe's doing it and we have to work with that market, our businesses will have to do it regardless of whether it's the law here, if they're wanting to do business with Europe. So we're going to have to be doing this stuff, because that comes into force in 2022, and everything, you've got a 3-year implementation period, so it's 5 years. It's not that long in terms of technology life cycles. So we're going to have to start gearing up our organizations to do this stuff. And of course, there needs to be the monitoring piece, because we've already got the public sector web accessibility legislation in place. What we're seeing as an organization is an increase in interest from public sector clients in doing this and auditing and making stuff accessible. What I'd like to see is much more active monitoring on behalf of governments around the world, so that it's enforced, because we've had a lot of disability inclusion legislation over the years that has been effectively toothless because it's not been enforced. So monitoring and reporting and then enforcement are the things that are going to really make a difference.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. No, it was really, really, really insightful angle. Rene has also said, always great to hear the wise words from Neil and Antonio. Thanks for organising this. The question from Gavin was around, but I think we'll have to do quite a quicker answer, but just if Access Chat may be on other formats. He's very full of praise about how well it's and he said, as if you aren't busy enough already. But yeah, is there any way that it might go beyond Twitter?
Yeah, maybe. Watch this space. We were talking about this offline. It's just finding the time. it's quite time consuming organizing what we organize already, but we'll see. I mean, things always evolve.
Yeah. And the one I'm using now is StreamYard, which goes Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn all in one go. So that's one way of potentially. And Gavin also said when we were talking earlier, this was one of the first businesses to install Welcome, helping their customer service team provide better service to disabled visitors. A small step for them, but a massive step for us. And that was, I think, when we're talking about innovation and how that change comes. I'm partly going quicker because someone's waiting outside to come and help me get lunch about to bark. So that's partly where my rhythm has changed.
Yes, we saw the golden hair.
I just wanted to say to Antonio, was there anything you wanted to add to what we were what Neil was talking about before?
No, I think I'm quite hopeful in relation to things change. On the last elections for the Portuguese Parliament, where they approved accessibility regulation in the late 80s, and then more recently they did a huge change within the Parliament. But then in the last election, they elected someone that needs to use a wheelchair, and the Parliament was not ready to receive someone in a wheelchair. So the place that approved the law, is not ready to. So and then they had to go and revamp the building again in order to accommodate them. So I'm particularly hopeful that things will improve over the next couple of years. We're all having this conversation today here on LinkedIn, on Facebook, across different platforms. I'm sure, if we go back 5 years ago, it was very, very difficult to have this conversation on accessibility. You probably had to go to a meeting somewhere in a closed space to talk about it. So I think things are opening and getting better.
Yeah, and I think that there's the reality of the barriers and the constraints you're saying about where an IT system that the variables and the restraints are a bit more complex. But in the end, whilst there's a reality, we have to dream big. We have to be optimistic, because if we believe it can happen, humans have shown it time and time again that it is possible. We just have to point resources the right way. So, and Sunny agrees.
Yes, your executive producer is telling you that it's time to end the show.
It's time. Yeah, it's lunchtime. Okay. Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I've been
great talking.
Chatting to you both. Good luck with everything. And as always, if I can help you, you know where I am.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks.
All right. Take care. And everyone watching, thanks for your comments and for joining in now and on the replay. And I'll be back, all being well, tomorrow at midday. Until then, have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.